Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben and with me this week is...
A mutant from the Mutant Chronicles.
Oh wow, we'll get into it. But before we dive too hard, let's just get through the synopsis and the facts because I have words.
This week we watched Mutant Chronicles from 2008. I want to say 2008. Yes, it's 2008. All right. And if you have never heard of this movie, I'm not surprised, but this is what it's about. In a diesel punk future where Earth's corporations are at war, an ancient underground machine awakens and unleashes a mutant plague that wipes out most of humanity. Now, a disgraced soldier joins a suicide mission led by a religious order to infiltrate the machine at the planet's core and destroy it before the last human cities fall. That's it.
Yeah. I think that actually gives it more story credit than this film deserves. But let's go to the stats and facts. Released 2008. The reason you're confused is because it was released twice in 2008 and 2009. But we're going to go with its original release. Directed by Simon Hunter. Screenplay by Philip Eisner and Stuart Hazeldine. Cinematographer is Jeff Boyle. Music by Richard Wells. Starring Thomas Jane, Ron Perlman, John Malkovich, Devon Aoki, Benno Furman, Sean Pertwee, Tom Wu, Steve Toussaint, and Anna Walton. A runtime of, I think it's 111 minutes. It's weird. Hang on, wait. I got it here. Aha! Yeah, 111 minutes. Wow. Box office.
Felt longer. Did it feel longer?
Just 211 minutes is weird. Box office total worldwide, there is no splits here really. $2,131,057 with a budget of $25 million. The highest grossing location for this was the UK at $228,000.
So what did you think?
This movie's horrendous. This movie is unfinished. This movie is just dreams. This movie's full of dreams. Dreams that were not fulfilled, were not accomplished, and were the ones that are in there executed poorly. I've seen better computer graphics on an MS-DOS game. But yeah, so cool. Thanks for this one, Jim.
Look, I was a bit worried that, and look, this still may happen. You might have thought I was, trolling or being mean when I was choosing
insanely
this
mean
one.
to me. Yeah, it felt like it.
That's not what I was doing here. I find this movie fascinating. First of all, I don't like it. It's not good. So
being as kind as I can to this film, if this film has an audience, I'd love to talk to them and find where they get their enjoyment for this film from. Because it is just unaccomplished is the kindest thing I can say for it.
Well, I think what's really... it's definitely the world, right? This is based on a role-playing game, and the world is cool. That's the thing. Like, this is a cool world. It's very sort of Warhammer 40K. It's got a lot of really fun ideas. The whole, diesel punk aesthetic and the idea that we've got this sort of old tech that we're using as spacecrafts. It's inventive and it's fun and it's unusual. And then you add on the mutant layer on top of that, and they're ancient and whatnot. There's the idea of 4 corporations ruling the planet. Like, there's a lot of stuff here that you go, wow, that's really interesting. But this is just... So I feel like if people like the movie, it's because of that, And honestly, that's what drew me to the movie. This was a film that I was excited about prior to its release. I actually did have knowledge that it was coming. I was very into... corners of the internet where this was, actually promoted. So I knew it was on the radar. And then when it actually arrived, I was like, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to be.
And look, as someone who is into Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games and tabletop games like that, this very much feels like a world where you could have that thing in there. And it really suffers from that too, because it feels like somebody's bad tabletop story they came up with in this world, and they thought, let's translate this into a movie. We're great storytelling geniuses. And you weren't. This movie, I think's lacking. It's multiple. You said, as you said, there's cool things in this movie, cool ideas, but they're like starting puzzle pieces that never connect in the middle, right? So you've got the world, you've got some character stuff, you've got the mutant stuff, you've got the idea of, this mysterious machine, but you don't have an antagonist. You don't have like a human beating heart through this film. You don't have the things that would carry this sort of story. And it kind of really, really feels it. I mean, the most interesting thing in this movie is a cameo by John Malkovich, because you're like, what's he doing here?
Well, it's John Malkovich and it's Ron Perlman, both of whom is sort of like, wow, what are you guys doing here? Thomas Jane, you kind of understand because at least he was the lead. So
I'm
you
a
sort of
fan
say,
of Thomas Jane too. I like his level of film a lot of the time. Like, they're really easily consumable, and he has a lane and he sticks to it.
Yeah. But look, yeah, there are just multiple problems with this movie, and so much so that I wanted to talk about it. I thought it would be interesting to revisit with somebody else because I'm familiar with this film, but I was like, well, so rarely do we actually get to see something that is, I'm going to call it unfinished. You said it before. It feels like it's just not done. Like, it feels like the movie is incomplete. There's version of it out there somewhere that, they ran out of effects money or something. Now, there's very little you can find on this movie. It's very hard to research. It exists.
They definitely ran out of effects money. Like, there's some previs in this movie.
Yeah, well, that's what it feels like, isn't it? Like, and there was like, there was a pack called Action Essentials for After Effects that you could get. You probably can still get it today, but it looks like this movie was made using Action Essentials by some teenager who was paid money to do it on their home computer, which all sounds not very nice and not very flattering, but it's also just the way it is. This movie doesn't look good. This movie has visual effects that do not hold up, and you cannot even paint it with the brush of saying, oh, it's stylistic. I'm like, no, that's a cop-out. Sky Captain stylistic. This is something else,
Like, some bad movies have defenders in their creators and things like it. I think of Yui Ball, right? Like, he always defends his products and his projects and things like that. I would hazard to guess there's not many people who made this film defending this film. It feels like a paycheck for a lot of people who are in it, around it, making it. Talking about the visual effects, by the way, there's a visual effect that has stuck in my mind since watching this, and it is when they're in the elevator shaft, and there's the guy defending it at the top, and he kind of kills the first mutant, and the mutant flies back and pops into smoke and a blood packet. That is just the craziest thing I've ever seen in a professional film ever.
Yeah. And then there's lots of things like that in the movie where you just go, it's just not done. It's just not finished yet. It's the idea that this was at a quality that it is able to be released is just incorrect, because it is not. Okay. Right. And most of these films, because there are definitely movies like this, the difference with this one is they actually released it. Usually these things just get buried and they never get finished, and it's over and it's on the scrap pile. But the weird thing about this one is they actually carried it through to release. We actually get to see it,
The other thing is, movies like this do exist, but the tone is different. This movie exists as if it thinks it has the potential to be an A film. It doesn't ever think it's below that. You can tell that by the way the script kind of writes itself out. Like, there's no tongue-in-cheek in this movie. If there was tongue-in-cheek, this movie could survive. It could still take itself seriously if there was that kind of, that little nod, that little wink to the audience where it says, we know what we are. Like, Tubi exists off those movies. This doesn't belong with that.
No, and it's also as well that at the price point, $25 million, it's actually far too expensive to exist in that, D tier bracket where people are lovingly doing these almost homemade versions of these silly
Yeah.
movies. It's like they've actually spent too much money on it. So you put all that together, and what do you get? Well, you get this. You get this movie where there was clearly an idea that we're going to do it on the cheap. We'll spend some money on the actors. It's an independent production. And they're clearly looking at movies like Sin City or like Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, and they're saying, there are some production shortcuts that we could use looking at those other films, and we're going to use them as production shortcuts. Not really a stylistic approach, or they might have said that as well, but it was definitely thought of that that will be a production shortcut. And ultimately, they just didn't have the right level of production design and art direction to actually carry it off. Actually, the on-set stuff doesn't look too bad.
No.
The stuff that they actually did shoot for real, looks half decent. Although I will say that the direction of those elements is quite lacking as well. Just when they start fighting and you look at the choices in terms of the camera angles, I was like, this looks like someone who's never shot a fight scene before. You're not sure where to put the camera, and it's not cutting together well. It's like, this isn't even anything to do with the visual effects now. It's just simple scene geography and, trying to get the choreography right. And look, maybe it's that level of tier where they're like, well, we didn't have a fight choreographer. It was just making it up with the actors and whatnot. I'm not sure. It's just something happened to make this feel like, even when we are shooting it practically, the actual craft of film direction and, placement of actors and blocking isn't there.
So I studied film at university, so have you. One of the first things you're taught when you're developing a script for a screen is to kind of block it out, do storyboards, right? Do your kind of geography in your scene. It really didn't feel like that was done, like you said. And it also feels like there were certain digital camera moves that they attempted to cover that up that looked horrendous. Like there's a scene towards the end when they're on the machine and there's this digital camera move through a window into the scene, and they cut between the two shots, and it's jarringly bad because you are instantly taken out of the film because of how it looks and how the camera moves so unnaturally through the space.
I think so. All of that, you put that together, and again, you don't want to be unkind, but when you're trying to articulate what it is you're seeing, you are left with the word, well, it feels amateur in its execution rather than professional. It just doesn't feel like a professional product. So, which again comes back to, I think, the idea that they probably just didn't have all of the standard department heads that you would usually have. And a lot of people were probably filling gaps in roles that maybe they weren't used to or just weren't skilled at, perhaps to actually get this over the line. And I'm also reminded Simon Hunter as a director he's had 2 films on his list,
Yeah.
and this is the second one, right? Second and final at this stage. And I am reminded a little bit of Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, where Kerry Conran, that was his only film as well. I think the difference on that production, aside from the fact that they did have a bit more money to use, was that the team around him was very accomplished at making movies and knew what they were doing. Whereas we don't get that sense in Mutant Chronicles. We don't get that idea that perhaps there was a producer who really knew the biz and really knew how to wrangle all this stuff and make this happen. What we got was something where, we just have way too many gaps to fill. So the other thing that really strikes me about this film, aside from, okay, we've talked about the technical side. We said, look, it just is weird. It's unfinished. It's almost amateur in its presentation. When you look at the building blocks of any film and you look at the idea of story and you look at the idea of characters, this film has several baffling choices on that front as well, that don't seem to really hold up from scene to scene, and there's so much stuff that's illogical about the way it actually goes forward.
Can I mention the start of this film starts 3 times?
Yes.
Like it has 3 distinct beginnings that all explain, relatively speaking, the same thing. Yeah. So the first is almost a static image of a map. The second is the trench scene, and then you kind of get the third, which is the monk, right? And they all don't progress the plot. You only need one of them. Yep. So you've got this immediate quagmire at the start where you're spending, I want to say, almost 20 minutes of no progression whatsoever. You're introduced to your main character, you're introduced to our situation, but that's it. You almost don't need the explanation of the corporations. You can just be introduced to them in the boardroom, right? You don't need the explanation as deep as they go in the current political climate. You just need to know there's war and mutants happen, and they tell it 3 times.
And the trench scene goes on and on and on and on. And
it makes you think that's going to be the whole movie, though.
Exactly.
Like, that's where it's set.
That's the thing. It goes on so long that you're like, okay, well, this is the team and this is the movie, and the movie's going to launch from here. But that's actually just kind of a prologue, but it doesn't feel that way because it's so extended. So it also, that trench scene did something for me where this movie is a movie that is ugly in terms of its content, not just visually. Like, you know, there are movies that are violent. You know, you might look at something like, I don't know, John Wick or something, and you say, that's violent. He kills a lot of people in that movie. This movie, though, is ugly. It's gory in a way that might not be very realistic, and it might not be very believable, but it's almost kind of stomach churning, and it's very sort of off-putting and unsettling. And if you wanted to, you know, say that was maybe something that they got right, if that's what they were going for, but I don't think they were, because that's not really the tone that they're trying to hit for the rest of it, which again just sort of means that you end up with this, why is it so gut churning, why is it so gory?
I really feel like that was a post-production decision, because they would have looked at their product and go, what do we sell this on? We don't have anything to... I know, let's make it horror and gory. We'll at least hit that market. Because there is a market for people who just want to watch that mindless stuff, right? Might not be our thing, but it is definitely... it is definitely there. And I feel like that feels like a paw coming in and going, we'll just up the violence, up the gore. Why? Because we need something. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, we need us something, you know, and it's similar a little bit in terms of the profanity as well. Like every second word is an expletive in this movie, and it's a bit like, what, why?
Okay, I have a side tangent. So I actually found this movie a bit difficult to watch, and eventually I'm like, oh, there's a whole version of it on YouTube. It's not my preferred method, but I'll do it. I put it on, I watch it, and then there's a beep. And I'm like, whoa, that's weird. And then I realize they're beeping every curse word. And I think to myself, I can watch it. It's not going to be that. There are too many curse words, and you actually don't hear the dialogue because they're beeping it out too much. So I had to find a different version of the film.
Yeah, well, it does sort of just go to show you, though, where it's like, we don't need this level of swear. Like, it's the level of swearing and cussing in the movie is actually distracting, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to be, you know, say, oh, we don't want this in any movie ever, you know, although it's not my preferred method of expressing oneself, but still it's distracting. And it's along the same lines as the gore. I'm like, this is distracting. I'm thinking about this rather than about the story, and it's unsettling, and it's not fun, and it's something that is, you know, causing me more pain to watch, you know?
When I was in grade 6, we had a assignment to write a piece of dialogue, like a script, right? One page, nothing. And it was just basically to learn perspective, right? Like first person, second, all that sort of stuff. The dialogue in this movie felt like what I kind of wrote then. It was that kind of I talk A, you talk B. I talk A, conversation over. There was no weaving, there was no communication. And you're right about the language. It almost felt like sawdust, a filler. Like it's just pack more in, make it go longer. And it felt really kind of, it felt like a 12-year-old who just learned to swear, is what it felt like.
Yeah. So it's not, and so then you sort of go,
And
okay.
I like swearing in movies. We're different.
Well, then you sort of just go, okay, well, what is there to like? What is there to like in the film? The one sequence that I kind of like until they sort of wreck it at the end with something really silly is, when they finally get the team together, which takes them an awfully long time to do, and 3 openings, as you say. And they all get into this sort of submarine spaceship plane, is what I'm going to call it.
That's a cool piece of design.
I'm like, that's a cool piece of design. And they sort of, it's chugging smoke and they're taking off and they're trying to get to the place where the underground seal is to get to this. I don't mind that sequence where they take off and they're all strapped in and they're trying to go on the mission and they're sort of, dodging other, people who are taken off for the planet. That was an interesting sequence and maybe one of the better sequences in the movie because it's that combination of aesthetic and we're finally doing something and design and all that sort of thing. And then at the end of that sequence, they're like, it's a mutant in a plane. And I'm like, what? Aren't they mindless zombies? Why is one in a plane? How's it driving a plane? It's got a sword for an arm.
It introduces the most infuriating story consistency in this whole thing, and that is, what are the mutants capable of? Because you're right, up until that point, they're effectively drones, zombies. They're like ants, really. They collect stuff and they bring it back to the anthill, which is an understandable function. You can understand that. But when you've then got one who is a kamikaze pilot who's going completely against any sort of programming or action before that, it really throws off what the rest of the film to expect. And I think that's what they're trying to do in an unclever way. They're trying to subvert expectations, go, well, you don't know what's coming next. We do. And that is a really poor way to do it.
It's also just like, it raises so many questions because it's like, how does that mutant know that their ship is the one to attack? There's a million ships in the sky. What are they sentient? What's happening here? It's such an odd end to a scene that I was almost enjoying in terms of the movie itself. But it kind of does just get worse with the plot inconsistencies the deeper they go into the city, which is then revealed as a machine, which is then eventually revealed as a spaceship, and it's like what?
So for audio listeners, the face I just made was the face I made when I watched this movie. When it's not a bomb, it's a key to launch a spaceship. So basically it's just to move the problem that they have.
It's also though
not a solution.
They don't know that it's a spaceship. They don't know that it's a key, not a bomb. They don't know how to use it, and yet at the same time, they are very confident that this is what they should do. And then
also, they had the key all along. Don't forget.
Well, yeah, and the closer they get to the core of the machine, the more they sort of just go with, oh yeah, we'll put this thing here and that'll work. And I'm like, but wait. They clearly articulate several times that they don't know what they're doing or how to use it. And if you were to actually point at any hint of what we would call character development, which there really isn't any, but there is this recurring idea that the main character needs to, quote unquote, have faith because the Brotherhood has faith that things will be okay. And I'm like, faith in what? In God? In the book? in the Brotherhood? In what are we having faith in? What is the character supposed to be trusting? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. It's not articulated well enough for us to actually get there. So we have this book which has this thing that we think is a bomb. Why do we think it's a bomb? We don't know. We can't read the script. I'm like, wait, what? Like, it's just baffling. And at that point, you are just sort of going, how is there even a map to this city, which is not a city, which is actually a spaceship? It's not finished, Ben. The script's not finished either. The script has it. We were several versions in, and we didn't go back and tidy up what we rewrote in previous versions. We just shot all of it. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, it's a perplexing. What is perplexing is that it got released, and you mentioned it earlier, right? Because there are better films out there that haven't been released. I'm certain of, right? We've actually been through, almost because of the streaming age, a bit of an epidemic of cancelled and held films, and I'm 99% sure they're all better than this.
Yeah,
all of them.
I'll take that Batgirl film over this. I'm sure
the Wile E. Coyote film we're actually getting. So hey, it is perplexing. It's not perplexing that anyone took the job. These are all working actors. They're all people who need to work. These are all working crew members. These are people who need to write for a living. None of them doing this is perplexing. The idea that you would release this and not just write this off as a tax thing is crazy.
I think though, because it was an independent production, they probably didn't have a choice. We got to go.
Someone would have had to have purchased it to release it, right? What do we got?
Distribution. I think it had a spider web of distribution.
It did. So it had two different distributors for parts of the world, but yeah.
So you're trying to sell it to recoup some of your costs, in order to get that going. But if this was a studio release, I reckon it absolutely would have been shelved. But even just in terms of the whole idea that some of the things that are the cool world building things, the idea that there's 4 corporations that they rule the world, I'm like, that's actually interesting, but it's not important to this movie, which very quickly turns into, 6 or 7 people on a mission to do a thing underground, and they don't meet anyone else except mutants. I'm like, well, it's not really important that there was 4 big corporations who rule the planet, is it?
This isn't something we often do, and it's something we've actually avoided in the past. But I'd like to pick your brain. How would you fix this movie with what you have? You have the world, you have the characters. I have an idea of what to do. I have 2 ideas of what to do. So if you want time to think, I'm happy to go through mine.
No, I think the challenge with this movie is it's not clear what the production constraints were that they were battling against. Do you know what I mean? So therefore, creating a fix for it is actually quite difficult. If you were to simply say, make a better version of this movie story-wise, I'm like, yeah, we could do that. But I'm a bit like, this one, I think, looks the way it does because there was clearly stuff going on behind the scenes that they were reacting to in the moment. And I sort of think until we know what that is, it's pretty hard to sort of work out a fix. In terms of, all right, look, if I had to take existing footage and actually try and do something with this, I would remove the opening trench sequence, and I would, basically do a little bit more character stuff in terms of reshoots, if we could sneak those in as they're walking through the tunnels. And I would make this whole thing, men on a mission to actually take out this machine post-evacuation where most of the planet's already gone anyway.
You pretty much struck on what I was going to say. I just make it smaller. Yeah. Just make it smaller. Make it almost all tunnels. Get them into the tunnels and make it like an atmospheric thing in the tunnels. The other thing I think you could introduce that explains or helps explain some of the inconsistencies with our villains is that you just have 1 or 2 smarter drones who control other drones, and they actually become your antagonists. right? Have someone who's turned early in the film who becomes kind of like a general drone, and they're commanding the other drones and they're following from a distance, and you can have that final conflict at the end. But yeah, something that makes it more personal in that moment. The other thing is, and it's a dream, I actually think there's a better story that is mentioned in this film that they don't tell. And that's the original sealing of this thing.
Yeah. How much better is that?
That's Knights of the Templar with swords versus these aliens who seal this crypt. That's the story, man.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole thing. You get to end on this moment of probably massive human sacrifice of the world coming together to stop this. And then the dread of knowing, hey, man, this won't last forever. Like, that story is, I think, the more interesting story to me. But that's a different genre of film.
It's a different genre. It's also a different price point. And in fact, the film that they even tried to make was a different price point. Like, this world, this big world with diesel punk spaceships and, mutants and, all this lore and all of this sort of, the seal and the war. I'm like, this is $160 million idea. Like, it is not a $25 million idea, like,
well, it's effectively Day After Tomorrow, right? Like, it's there are movies that this is close to in genre and like content. Like, we've seen this movie work.
Yeah, it's look, I thought it was interesting. I didn't do it on purpose, I promise.
A conversation.
I was just like, have you seen this thing? Because this thing's
Jim,
wild.
Nobody has seen this thing. I'd be surprised if anyone who listens to this podcast has seen that movie.
Well, they've seen it now.
That's awful. All right, so let me go through some socials, where to find us, and then I'll tell us what our next movie is. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you want to listen to or watch anything we've done before, you can do so by looking up Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures, YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. You can see our massive back catalogue at this stage. There are definitely a lot better movies that we have watched. There are a couple of movies that are close to this.
I don't think so.
You're right. But there's definitely way better movies that we've watched. Go have a look. Go find your favorite movie. If you can't find your favorite movie, comment on this episode and tell us what your favorite movie is so we can add it to the list and watch better movies in the future. If you want to see any sort of social media, you can do so at Jim_and_Ben for Instagram and Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures on TikTok. Now, I took a bit of inspiration from this movie to pick our next movie. Because as I said earlier in this movie, do you remember what my favorite thing about it was? The John Malkovich cameo.
Oh, okay. So
I'm going to pick one of my favorite John Malkovich performances in cinema ever. And that is from the movie Rounders.
Oh, I haven't seen Rounders.
Oh, so Rounders is a poker movie starring...
Isn't it Matt Damon?
Matt Damon and John Malkovich.
I haven't seen
young
it.
Matt Damon. So we're going to watch Rounders. It's on Prime, I believe, for anyone who's looking. But yeah, that's what we'll be watching next podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and I apologize for the last movie we just watched.
Me too. Bye.
Bye.